Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Abdul Case Hub. In our today's episode, we're going to be explaining about strip foundation details. Now on your screen here, this is just a simple illustration of a strip foundation details. And then looking at this drawing here, we're going to be analyzing the drawing. Then from the bottom, we have 675, which is the width of our foundation here, 675. And then after I must have done the excavation, the first thing that is coming on it is your concrete blinding. And then from the bottom, we have our concrete blinding here. This dot at the bottom actually represents the concrete blinding. And then this concrete blinding is a weak concrete, usually 50 mm thick. And then looking at it from the right side of it, from the right hand side of it, you're going to see the thickness of the blinding, which is 50 mm concrete blinding. And then after I must have done the blinding, the next thing is going to be foundation footing. You can either call it foundation footing, concrete footing, or concreting foundation. So after your blinding, you're going to have that, and then this is what you have here. This is our concrete footing placed on top of your concrete blinding. And then to the right hand side, you're going to see the dimension there. The thickness of it is what is said to be 225 mm concrete footing. So that's the thickness of our concrete footing or foundation footing, whichever one. And then after that, we have the block work, which is rightly seated at the middle of your foundation width. And then looking at it from the top, you're going to see the thickness of the block. That is to tell you the size of block we are using here. This is 225 mm, which is equivalent to 9 inches block. So this is how the block is going to be, just like the way you have it on your screen. Now looking at it on your screen, you can see that the block is actually fixed or placed at the middle of your foundation width. And then to the both end, you're going to have spaces, just like the way you have it here on the drawing. Now from this side, you have 225 mm to this side, and then to the other end also you have 225 mm. This is said to be spread, which is more like a working allowance. So, and then after that, at the top left hand side of this drawing, which is this, we have our hard core, and then we also have our concrete oversight. Now the bottom one is said to be the hard core, then while the one at the top is said to be the concrete oversight, which many people usually call DPC, or in a layman language you can refer to it as German floor. Now the bottom one is actually the hard core, and then checking the dimension to the left, you're going to see the thickness of our hard core here. This is our hard core, 300 mm thick. And then just like the way you have it on your screen, this is the practical aspect of it. This is our hard core. This is how the hard core is. And then the hard core is what? 300 mm thick. And then after that, you said we have our concrete oversight, which is the German floor or the DPC as the case may be. And then checking the dimension also to the left, we have 150 mm. You can see we have floor slab 150 mm thick. That's the thickness of our concrete floor slab. And then I believe we all know what concrete oversight is. And then after that, now let's quickly look at how we can determine the depth of this foundation detail. Now for you to determine the depth of this foundation detail, that is where you're going to make use of these values here, starting from the 50 mm concrete blinding, then towards to the concrete footing, which is 225 mm thick. And then this 900 we are seeing here, that is the distance between, that's the distance from the top of our foundation footing or the concrete footing, from the top of the concrete footing to the ground level, which is this GL, stand for ground level. So from the top of the concrete footing to the ground level is said to be 900 mm. So when you add up everything together, just for instance, for us to determine the depth of the foundation, now we're going to say we have our blinding and then the thickness of our blinding is 50 mm thick. And then we have our footing, which is the foundation footing or the concrete footing. You have it to be 225 mm thick. And then we said from the footing up to the ground level, which is the GL, it is said to be 900 mm thick. Now when you add up everything together, you're going to have when you add it up together, you're going to have 1175 mm thick. Now to get the actual depth of the foundation, you are expected to less topsoil. TS stand for topsoil, and then the topsoil is actually 150 mm thick. The 150 mm thick is constant, and then the deduction of the topsoil is also constant. And then when you do that, you're going to have, and then when you do the deduction, you're going to have 1025 mm as the total depth of your foundation. And then mind you that as a QS student, you need to know that we don't actually work in millimeter. That is the reason why you have to convert this to meter before you make use of it. So how do you do that? 1025 mm, then you divide it by 1000, then that's going to give us 1.03 meter as the total depth of the foundation. So convert approximately, that's going to be 1.03 meter. So subscribe to Abdul QS Hub, and then don't forget to follow us for more videos, comment, share and like.